Okay, in today's episode, I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle than normal. I'm interviewing Karthik Suresh, the founder and chief product and technology officer of Ignition, an AI platform designed to help digital product managers get the job done more efficiently. I know this is different than what we've done in the past, but trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this episode. Karthik is going to break down AI, he's going to break down digital product management, and he gives us so many practical applications on how we can use AI today, as well as what to be aware of with AI coming in the future. So stick around all the way to the end, because when he starts digging into what is called agents in AI, you're going to be able to take your team of 1 to 2, maybe even 10 employees and make it seem like you have 100 employees. This is super powerful stuff. Without further ado, let's jump into the interview. I want to take a little bit of a different angle in this podcast than I have in the past. I usually dig into the personal history. Are you okay if we just dive right into the tactical section of things?
Let's do it.
Okay. Before we really dive super deep into it, I want to lay sort of the groundwork. So a lot of the listeners are either, in the marketing space or owners of companies, and a lot of them are small business owners, dentists, doctors, lawyers, chiropractors, stuff like that. And I want to make sure that we add as much value to the small business owners as well as the big business owners, as well as the marketing directors and all of that as well. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So at a high level, let's explain first, what is digital product management, and why is it important for them to understand what it is and how it can impact their business?
If you take a step back about just like product management in general, right? It's more like,
Yeah.
more from a higher level, like product strategy perspective. Okay, where is the market going? Who is my target persona? What are their problems today? What are the problems in 6 months? How do I solve them? How do I solve them in with respect to my product? What's it doing a good job with? What's it not doing a good job? So coming up with a strategy on a higher level, coming up with some kind of a user stories, and then building those into initiatives, and then finally then making into more tactical versions of like, okay, this is what I need to actually build. Talking to the users,
Mm-hmm.
of course, is a big part of it. Digital product management is all about systematizing this process of like being able to like one on the research side, listening to what's happening in the market, what's the latest trends, and then listening to your customers, what are the problems they are facing, how are they solving it today, and then taking all those insights, coming up with your high level product strategy of what you're going to focus on solving, and then coming up with okay, how you're going to solve them, and then coming up with an execution plan for your engineering team or whoever you're working with to actually put it in practice. And then once it's solved, coming up with some kind of a launch plan saying, okay, how do I convey the value prop of my users to my end audience? Like a lot of the times, even when you build really good products, they still fail because you're not doing a really good job of like talking about it in a way the users understand the value prop, and then also positioning it. Like there's hundreds of competitors. Every category has hundreds of competitors these days because it's so easy to
Mm-hmm.
build software. So then how do you stand out? How do you position
Yeah.
yourself? Like what makes you different? Figuring that out. And then making sure you're including it in your ad, in your blog post, in your email outreach. So just doing this end to end. It's all about, that's basically what digital product management is.
Yeah, I look at it as sort of like, and some people might disagree with this, but they're sort of the glue in the middle that holds like all of the engineering side together with the marketing side, right? It's so you get
Yeah.
that full process. If you go to an engineer, the majority of engineers, they're so brilliant that if you just say, "Hey, go build me this X, Y, and Z," the end user is thinking, "Actually, I wanted X to be blue and I wanted Y to be yellow, and I like why didn't you think of that?" But the engineer said, "You told me to do X, Y, and Z. You didn't say colors. You didn't say numbers. You didn't say shapes or sizes. You just said X, Y, and Z, and that's what you got." And the digital product manager is going to the customers and saying, "What do you need?" Right? Like when you use these apps like Spotify or Audible and stuff, and you're like, it's just so intuitive. It's because they have a digital product manager that's doing surveys with customers like you and finding out what people like, what they don't like. They're looking at the data that where people are clicking, where they're not clicking, what things are broken, and then they're pushing that through to having the engineers do the development, but at the same time working with the marketers to say, "Hey, get ready. When this comes out, I need you to be pushing this," and so that it's one big flow in the process, right?
100%. I mean, you described it better than me. So that's exactly right. I think the big part of it is also like customer touch points. So you don't just talk to the customer before building the product and after building the product. you're also doing it while you're building it and getting like a
Yeah.
quick check to make sure you're in the right direction. And you're also like notifying that marketers and the sales team that, hey, this is coming. So you're just not operating
Yeah.
in a silo, which is what happens in a lot of the companies. So yeah.
I'm sure if there's digital marketers who are out there listening right now, I'm sure they could tell you some horror stories of this amazing product that they developed and launched, and they're like, it's going to just change everything. It's the silver bullet, I'm telling you. And they launch it, and then there's crickets, right? And the problem was they didn't, they said, what do you want in the beginning? They forgot about the customer in the middle. Then they launched it, and the customer's like, well, plans changed, or it's been a year since you asked me questions, or that's not exactly how I thought you were going to do it, right? So I'm sure every digital product manager has a horror story of this silver bullet that didn't actually launch.
So I think I mean, for example, like, in my, I can talk about like one of the products we built in one of my older startups is like, hey, we are building this
Mm-hmm.
company intelligence tool for salespeople, and then for hedge funds. And when we were building it, we were like, hey, you know what, like we made a bunch of assumptions. We asked hedge funds like, hey, do you want this? And they're like, yeah, if you give me data about how companies are doing, that's so valuable for us to trade. I'm like, great. So we went in and built it. We never talked to the customer. We took 6 months to build it, launch a product, and like, hey, hedge fund, here's it. And they're like, great. And they used it, but one hedge fund used it, and then they're like, okay, the alpha is already done, right? So we couldn't find a way to like reuse it and sell it to like multiple funds. So it was almost like,
Mm,
oh, we found the signal with this 20 companies, and but the thing is like market is efficient. They're like, hey, okay. So then we realized, oh
yeah.
my God, so maybe we can only sell it for one time to one fund. That's not a good
Mm-hmm.
business. If you don't have a repeatable sale of your product, we're going to die.
Yeah.
So we had to pivot away from it. So it's all of those things were just about like not being able to like really put everything together in a way it makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. As you were saying that, I was thinking of one that, an experience that we had. The other thing that digital product managers need to be aware of is the amount of customers that they have. It's not always just the end user, right? So we were developing within a CMS, we were developing some tools, and within the CMS, there's the user within the company that's going to take the content and deal with it on this side, right? But then how it got pushed to the website, and then how the end user saw that, how fast it happened, if we had to clear the cache, if we didn't clear the cache, where the cache was housed, right? Did it clear for just that page? Did it clear for the whole entire website? There's so many different scenarios that we had to walk through. And a lot of times we would include, one type of customer internal and forget about external customers, or vice versa. And so we thought we had this product that was amazing and it worked for 50% of them, but not all of them, right? And then you have to go back in, and it would have been more efficient to just do it all at the same time, but then you have to go back in and do some more work to fix what you missed on for the other customer. I love digital product management. I think more people, more companies should be aware of what it is, how important it is, and how to use it in their companies. So you're heavy in the digital product management side of things with AI. So let's dive into like people kind of understand what AI is, but as you and I were talking here a little bit before the show, you were mentioning how the hopeful outcome of this show is that any size business can look at this and say, with I can compete with the big dogs. I can compete with these billion-dollar companies when I only have 10 employees. Using AI makes me feel like I have 100 employees. And I think that's a great outcome. So let's talk about what AI is. Let's talk about, LLMs. Let's dive into the AI side of things.
Yeah, yeah, the exciting part. Yeah, I think this is a super important topic. It took a while even for me to understand the implications. And there's so many things out there. If you're scared and worried about things like, hey, we are all figuring this out, right? I mean, we're like, oh, what's the latest model? There's a new model of OpenAI. What does it mean?
Yeah.
Will AI actually take jobs? Will it, what is it actually? How is it going to impact the society? There's so many questions out there, and people are scared, people are excited, it's very uncertain, and nobody knows, right? Um,
Hmm.
but that's okay. It's a new technology. We're all figuring it out. I am here in the Silicon Valley, and I'm plugged into that. And trust me, every company, every board is talking about it, like how it's going to impact their business. So that's
Yeah.
that's not like out of the ordinary. But after diving deep, what I've actually figured out is like, especially, if you're a small business owner, or if you're, basically, trying to think about like, how do I, with very little resources, how do I make a big impact on my product? AI
Mm-hmm.
is going to give you superpowers. And that's the framing I would use. You know, so before I get into that framing, just a little bit of a history, right? So, what AI has been there, it's been around for decades, right? It's not new. What's new is this whole large language model, right? I mean, this whole current generation of large language models can trace its history back to like 2013, when Google introduced something called word to vec, where it takes a word and converts into vector, and then there was transformer architecture, the deep mind, developed tensor networks, and that lead to GPT-1 in 2018, which was still hallucinating a lot and it was not good enough. But then in 2022, the GPT-3, 2022, then GPT 3.3, 3.5, and now we have GPT 4.0. This is like
Mm-hmm.
literally like game changing. And now where we are today is like, OpenAI has this GPT models. Google has this, Gemini 1.5 Pro models. Anthropic has Cloud, and then there's all the commercial models. Then there's also open source models like Meta has Llama, and there's Mistral and Falcon, and so it's leading to an explosion of models here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, but the exciting part is like, if you take a step back, each model is good at something different, and it's basically going to be dependent on what your business is. But for example, we have seen like if you're doing like Anthropic is a little bit more humanizing. Google is really good at copywriting. But if you're processing large amounts of data, like I said, like if you're writing, if you're analyzing thousands of reviews, maybe you should use an open source model because it's going to cost you a lot. If you just use a regular OpenAI model, especially if you want to use that within your product, within your digital product. So there are different use cases for different models. So the first step is just going and playing with each of the models yourself. Obviously, like 95% of the world is just using ChatGPT today, which is great, and just probably solving most of your problems. But if you want to get a level deeper, the first step is like, hey, sign up for Anthropic Cloud, sign up for Google Gemini, and then also, I think there's a bunch of other platforms like Together or others which offer, and Grok and others which offer the open source models like Llama and Mistral and so on, which you can play with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first step. Then the next step is like, okay, if I'm already using ChatGPT, everyone's going to be using ChatGPT. Why should I think more? What you think about like advancements here is it's because ChatGPT doesn't have all the context about you as a company. It's going to give you very generic advice based on its own, scraping of all the data from the web. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have context about who's your persona, who's your competitor, about your industry, about your brand voice, about your personal voice. So there's a lot of context which is it's missing. So then the next level, taking the ChatGPT to the next level is you need to give it context. You need to like upload all these documents about you, which you could, if you're using ChatGPT, you could do it by uploading, directly, or if you're using an API, you can create something called a memory or a knowledge base where you can give in sorts of all these documents about you, who you are, what's your background, what's your history, what are you known for, what's your company known for, who are your competitors, what is your industry, like all that stuff. And then the output is going to be way better. For example, let's say using GPT to generate a Facebook ad or some sort of Google search ad or a blog post or an email. If you just say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey GPT, write me an email. I'm targeting all the engineers. I have a product for engineers. I have a product. Write me an email." Versus like, no, this is the product. This is who I am. This is the persona. Typically, people, my product sells for companies within 1,000 to 1,500 employees, and typically, like I sell to director of engineering. Like you need to give it all sorts of like details about your persona and this is the
Yeah.
competitors. This is how this industry has evolved. So the next step is giving it knowledge, specific knowledge, giving it
Okay.
context. That's how I would take it forward, so that
Mm-hmm.
um, it actually generates more customized and relevant data for you. Now, to take it even step further, and here maybe I'm getting a little bit technical, but I just want to like cover this full stack, but so that you can go
Yeah.
online and do your research. But the next step is actually building an agent. And the agents are really exciting is because that's when you can get superpowers. Even though you have 10 employees today, you can operate as if you have 100 employees. And agents are going to give you scale to actually go compete with the big league, even if you're a small business, right? And this is the thing I'm like excited about the most. And it's a very new technology. So don't worry if you haven't heard of it or if you haven't read about it. It's a new technology, but it'll be mainstream in another 3 to 6 months. So I want to make sure you start researching about it.
Okay.
So what's basically an agent is, AI agent is basically think of it as a package of stuff. So let's say your job is to write an ad for a competitor. Let's
Okay.
forget about AI, let's forget about agents. Let's say your job is like, hey, I want to write an ad against a competitor. So how do you do it? You first go to the competitor website. You then
Hmm.
read the competitor, what they're good at, how they're positioning themselves. So you get all the data. And
Hmm.
then once you have the data, then you have the data about your own company, product, your own brand voice, your context. Then using all of that, then you come up with like, let's say a Google search ad. So that then you're going to target that ad against that competitor keyword, right? So that's your process. Now imagine
Hmm.
you can replace that with an agent. So an agent has an LLM, of course, like an OpenAI, Google, or it has an LLM under instruction saying, "Hey, write an ad against my competitor X," and then imagine you're an expert digital marketer. I'm trying to place a Google search ad against my competitor. Go do it, but you also give it access to tools. You give it a web scraper, you give it like access to like some sort of Google search. You give it access to like best practices for writing ads. You give it some knowledge base and memory about who your company is and all the documents we talked about all the collateral you have for the company. So you have tools, which is like web scraper, and then you have memory, which is about your company, and
Hmm.
then you build an agent, which is like your digital marketing agent, which now has an LLM. Just to repeat, it has an LLM, it has instructions, it has tools, it has a memory, which is a knowledge base, and now it actually does the work of a digital marketer to help basically expand your marketing team without you having to worry about like, doing this all manually. And basically what it's going to do is like you're giving this instruction saying, write an ad against my competitor to this agent, and the agent is then going to go scrape the web, get the data, go look at your memory, which is your knowledge base, get all the data about your
Hmm.
company and who you are, about your product, then going to come up with the ad, create an ad, and then even directly even can pipe it to Google. All of that
Hmm.
just done by one agent. So, and then you imagine you have this army of agents, and then you have an agent to
Yeah.
spawn an agent, and then you have a marketing agent, sales agent, your SDR agent, and then literally imagine then you just have like Iron Man, like superpowers. So you just have this armor of agents. So you are like a 10-person company, but you have like 100 agents supporting your
Hmm.
10-person company, and then you're again off to the big leagues, and then you're targeting at scale. So imagine the vision where you're acting as if you're targeting like globally, expanding globally, targeting at scale, running thousands of campaigns at once. And that's the
Hmm.
power of AI. It's all obviously coming.
So what you're saying, if I were to recap and I use ChatGPT, so I need to choose my LLM, right? So step one, choose your LLM. So I got ChatGPT. I need to then feed it all the information about my company, my persona, all of that. Then I create the agent, and the agent is what goes and does things for me. And then on top of the agent, you can train it to go and integrate with other tools using APIs. I mean, I've heard of them, connecting to like Zapier. So if you're not like plugging into APIs manually, you go plug into Zapier. So you have those 4 steps, and you basically you've taken, a team of 10 and made them a team of 100.
Yeah,
Right? Is that a
exactly.
fair assessment of your recap?
Exactly. So where is this team of 10 versus 100 is coming? Like let's take the example of Zapier, right? Zapier obviously is great in automation, but you need to set it up. You need to say, okay, I need to set up this automation. I need to figure out like
Hmm.
what are the steps I need to use, and then you go set it up and then you run it. But imagine, and you replace that by LLM. where LLM is deciding, okay, I'm going to set it up. I'm going to, you know what, I need to call this tool. I need to refer to this doc, and it's doing the job and
Hmm.
then you spawn up like all a multiple number of agents doing this. So that's where the automation comes in.
A couple episodes, I interviewed Dan Page, and he had talked about creating different GPTs, and he talked about the strategy where he owns an agency, and he created a GPT where he put all that information in, and for onboarding a client, he just said, "Here's the client onboarding documentation," and because it was connected to Slack, it created a Slack group for that client, and automatically sent out all the invites for it. It sent the welcome emails. It connected to X, Y, and Z platform and did it all. And it was something that took 5 minutes versus something that onboarding a client for him would normally take 30 minutes to an hour to go through and do all that individually. And when you have lots of clients coming in, that's a big time saver.
Yeah. And then take it a step further because you're basically your friend is still like trying to give it instructions, say, go to Slack, go to this, send an email, send that. And then here's an agent who's deciding based on who the person is, like, oh, maybe this person doesn't use Slack. I'm just going to send an email and then follow up an email. It's going to decide on the fly and then set up a personalized, customized onboarding experience for each user. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of how you scale your business.
So a lot of this can it be found like on YouTube, like just how to do it. Like it seems intimidating as you're talking about it. I'm like, oh, I would love to have that, but like I don't even know where to start. Is that Can I just go to YouTube and someone will teach me how to do it, or will ChatGPT teach me how to do it, or like where if I'm a business owner, where do I start?
Yeah, just use ChatGPT, and I mean YouTube is obviously great. There's a lot of videos, and again,
Yeah.
um, all of these are emerging technologies, right? So I want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure you all have a head start here. A lot of these people are still figuring out how to the best practices. In 6 months to a year, all of this will become mainstream, right? So I just want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure, give you a heads up so you can actually start researching right now. Go to Google. Obviously you can ask ChatGPT
Yeah.
like, how do I set it up? How can I use ChatGPT to set this workflow? And then yeah, you can get that. But it's more about once you start digging in, and then how do you use it for your business? How do you use it for your product? And then you gotta like make that decision. And a lot of it is very intuitive. And then obviously there's new startups which are coming in to solve this problem as well.
So Karthik, in your opinion, what are the most exciting technologies currently shaping user engagement online right now?
Yeah, I mean, so actually coming going back to going a little bit back to the digital product management conversation we
Mm-hmm.
had, right? When you talk about the digital product, all the technologies, the one thing I think we forgot to mention is like you look at the whole funnel. So we talked about a new product or a new feature launch, but also like
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have ongoing product management, you got to think about the whole funnel, like how you're acquiring users. Then once you acquire users, how do you engage the users? And then make sure they come, and then how do you retain users? So they come back weekly, monthly, quarterly, and all that, right? So then you kind of apply different kind of technologies and tactics at each stage of this funnel. And obviously, the final phase of the funnel is obviously make money, right? That's at the end of the day, it's a
Yeah.
business. So how do you charge and how do you upsell, and then all of those things. So I think again, obviously a lot of this is going to be impacted by AI. When you're, let's say, acquisition, we just talked about how you can scale acquisition, right? If you're sending 10 emails a day, or if you're sending like 10 personalized LinkedIn ads, or in LinkedIn emails, or whatever you're doing, how you can make it into thousands, using some version of an agent, which is basically looking at your previous emails you've sent and all the leads that you have in your list, going and
Mm-hmm.
scraping each of their company's websites, getting data about them, personalizing the email, and then sending it. So you can set it up. So that's on the acquisition side. And then once on the acquisition, then they come back and start using it. Then you can then figure out like, okay, what are the, hopefully you have some kind of analytics tool. I don't know if you just Google Analytics, or maybe you're using some more advanced analytics tool. Then really, making sure like you figure out like where users are spending the most time, or where users are churning, or where users are getting
Mm-hmm.
blocked in that, and then figuring out like how do you make sure that that's not the case. And then on the retention side, it's like how do you get them to come back? Are you sending notifications? Are you sending reminders? Are you sending like a weekly digest of all the things they did in the app? Like, and then thinking about
Mm-hmm.
automating all of that as well, and then getting them to come back. And then finally, of course, upsell, right? You have, let's say you have one product, you have a new feature for the product, getting them to upsell. So there are emerging apps and technologies for each part of the funnel. So it's not like one thing, but you would actually say, okay, what are my problems? Do I have a top of the funnel problem? Or do I
Hmm.
have top like where I have problem acquiring users? Or no, I have no problem acquiring users. This don't stick. It's like a
Hmm.
like it's almost a leaky bucket problem, right? So then I got to fix.
Yeah.
So I think the first step you always start with where am I having the biggest bottleneck or issue, and then you say, okay, how do I use the new technologies? How do I use AI here to automate? For example, in acquisition, it's an outreach and engagement. It's more about figuring out, like, I have all this, like we talked about reviews, looking at thousands of reviews and figuring out what users are saying are the issues with your app, and then fixing them. So that's kind of how we would approach it.
Yeah. So with the reviews, just let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So you say you have 1,000 reviews, you export all those reviews, you put them into AI and say, you know, give me the tone, tell me what the problem areas are. There positive ones, negative ones? What are the concerns? And basically, the AI will split it up and say, here are all the positive ones. They love the app. Here are the concerns. The app is breaking down here, here, and here. This person said a bad word. They're not happy, right? Like that's what the AI can do for you instead of you going through one by one, reading it, understanding the context, understanding the tone, understanding if they're joking or serious. The AI does that for you, puts it into those buckets, and then you can say, give this negative feedback to the product team so they can go fix it. Give the positive to marketing so they can go and promote it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I mean, so you could just go download all your reviews, make sure you record your conversations with your customers, then use
Mm-hmm.
AI and then write different. I mean, the other thing I forgot to mention on the AI is prompt engineering. How do you prompt AI? Think of it like a
Mm-hmm.
fifth grader. It's almost like how do you teach a fifth grader to like read all the reviews and then come up with like these are the top three things which my customers want. Like, so you should be like,
Yeah.
hey, imagine you're an expert digital marketer, and then you are given a list of Amazon reviews for the product description, and then here's my product, this is what the product does, and give it examples. There's also like few different ways of prompting. There's like zero shot
Mm-hmm.
prompting, multi-shot prompting. All it means is you're giving example. Like you're saying, okay, this
Yeah.
is a review, and by the way, from this review, I see that the customer is having this issue about this product, and give it some five
Mm-hmm.
examples, and then say, okay, so now use this pattern. I'm going to give you 1,000 reviews or 10,000 reviews. That's when you start using Ignition actually, because beyond certain limit, ChatGPT or is they're not able to process. So if you want to have thousands
Yeah.
of reviews, then you would use a platform like Ignition where you would say upload it, and we don't have to worry about prompting. Then we would say, this is the overall sentiment about your product. These are your top
Mm-hmm.
strengths. These are your top weaknesses. This is the top three feature requests, right? And then you can say, okay, from a marketing angle, this is how users talk about your product. This is the most mentioned keywords. This is the top mentioned competitors. In your conversations, like we can extract all
Yeah.
of that with the click of a button. And then you would farm out
Yeah.
like, okay, here's a bunch of features I got to build. Hey, PM or engineer, go build this. Hey, marketer, make sure you talk about this objection handling for against a competitor. And you can farm out those insights to different people within your company.
Yeah, and it's not just reviews. It's like anything in bulk like that, right? Like in my last company, we had a feedback forum, and we got I don't even remember how many 1,000 a week or a month that would come through with like feedback, whether it was the website, the product, shipping, something like that. And so this was right when ChatGPT was coming out, and we would export all of that data. We would put it through ChatGPT and figure out do they leave their contact information? If so, send it to the call center and have them give them a call. Is a positive, negative, just like you're talking about. And it helped so much. Like we had full time employees before who were going through one by one, putting them into buckets and saying, here are the teams that need them. And then almost immediately, like you said, click of a button, all the feedback is sorted, all the reviews are sorted, all of this data was sorted, and it just helps so much. So, along those lines, there's two questions I have. I know that there are a lot of companies that are concerned with giving these AIs all of their data, right? And a lot of times you need to give them a lot of the data so that the AI can then give you accurate stuff back. What would you say to some companies that that are like, I would love to use AI to have to, go from 10 to 100 employees, but I'm concerned with giving my information into this big pool that who knows what's going to happen later on as AI continues to advance. What would you say to those business owners that are concerned about that?
That's a really valid concern, and that's a great
Mm-hmm.
question and something which we think a lot about it. So I can talk about it more from an enterprise, and we'll talk about it from a small business
Okay.
point of view. From an enterprise point of view, what everyone's doing there's a bunch of techniques they're using. One, always anonymize any personal information, right? Name, whatever name, date of birth, email, phone number. Make sure you anonymize that, and there are
Mm-hmm.
ways to anonymize that. Then two, that's why the open source models are great because like you can run an instance of your own open source version of like Llama. Llama is a large language model which is similar to GPT but developed by Meta, and it's an open source model, and you can run your own instance, for example, and then you have no worries because it's running locally. It's not being used to train something else. It doesn't escape your
Mm-hmm.
data center, cloud, or wherever you're running the data. So it's like imagine there's like almost like a cage around that model, right? So you can then that's why
Yeah.
a lot of the open source models are being developed, and it's very appealing. Then two, there's also like other things you could do like encryption. People are putting it in under when you use RAGs, which is like more like a advanced concept of retrieval method for your memory. You're converting everything to an embedding model. I won't go too detail into that, but that's more on the engineering side. But yes,
Yeah.
your concerns are absolutely valid. You should definitely stay away from putting any confidential data about your company. Sure, I mean, it's already on your website, right? You're trying to
Sure.
get an
Yeah.
ad out. It's on your website. Probably GPT has already crawled it. It already knows about it for
Yeah.
all you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's no concern there. But if you're putting in your customer name information, don't do that, right? Right.
Right.
Just don't. If you want to personalize your customer, I mean, let's say you are looking to personalize an email for a customer, give it their website, which is public. So, they can go scrape the website, get the data, and write an email, but don't give the customer name or the customer email. So yeah, you definitely got to use those caution. It's like just make up a name and then say this is a website. Go write an email and then change the name to the actual customer name when you actually send the email.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
that's a very valid concern. You need to be really careful about privacy. You should not, as much as possible, give it access to any personal info PII. And then
Mm-hmm.
if you want to take it a step further, look into open source models.
Nice. So along those same lines, are there any other ethical considerations that businesses should be aware of or keep in mind when using AI to enhance, their business, their user experience?
I mean, there is obviously like there's so many other questions and concerns right now, but it's like there's one other thing. It's less ethical, but more about hallucinations. Like a lot of the times, AI might make up stuff about your
Mm.
customer, about the
Mm-hmm.
website, about you, about. So you got to watch out for it's basically
Yeah.
hallucinations, and that's where you got to learn the parameters of these models. So the models actually have different parameters. The one which I like the most, it's called temperature, and temperature
Okay.
basically you can tweak it up and down, and it actually makes the model more creative and or less creative. And for example, if you have let's say you're building a customer support agent and you want it to answer questions based on FAQ doc you have, keep the
Mm-hmm.
temperature to 0. And if you want it to be creative, like coming up with an ad, maybe have like zero point 0.5, zero point 0.6. So learn to understand what these parameters are for all of these models, use that. And then, so the hallucinations can definitely impact your trust and can definitely impact your reputation and brand of your business because the
Yeah.
moment your customers see something which is doesn't make sense, they already lose trust. They might be like, "Oh, this is like AI generated stuff. I don't want to trust them." So you got to watch out there a lot. And people don't trust AI. And I don't trust AI as much. I mean, there's a lot of trust issues, which is fair. So you got to
Yeah.
watch out for that. Um, so yeah, those are some of the things that comes on top of my mind.
That's interesting that you bring that up. I remember the movie I, Robot with Will Smith. and where the robots dream. The one of them starts dreaming, and it's like a hallucination, like you're saying. So that's funny. But I also I remember there was a story about a lawyer that just uploaded all the documents and had ChatGPT spit out a bunch of examples and stuff, and they used it like in their case. Turns out that a lot of the examples were made up examples or hallucinations, like you're talking about, and they ended up losing the case and getting in
Yeah.
trouble. But so great advice. You need to be aware of what's coming out. You need to humanize it. You need to validate the data. All of that before using it and pushing it to the public, right?
100%. You need to have, I mean, if you're doing it at scale, you at least need to have some sampling mechanism. You're reviewing 1 in 10 emails which go out. Like you got to really think about it. Like all of, actually, this is
Yeah,
the last few questions are so important. Like talking about privacy,
yeah,
thinking about hallucination. So
yeah.
while the first half of this conversation, we discussed what are the advantages. It can give you superpowers. It can give you scale,
Mm-hmm.
but there are also risks, like any known
Yeah.
technology. So you got to like watch out for them. You got to like make sure you're thinking about them, addressing them, and solving for them. So yeah, those are really good questions.
I think one of the biggest like strengths of a company is using data to make excellent decisions. And a lot of bigger companies, they seem to have a bias in their data. They'll see the data or they'll twist the data to make it tell the story that they want, or it's an opinion of the C-suite or the owner that I want to go this way instead. It doesn't matter what the data says. I want to go this way. Talk to me about the benefit of AI when analyzing this data and giving an unbiased opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the data is definitely, I mean, even without AI, like if you have data, like there's no arguments, right? Like, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times, when I used to go to meetings at Facebook, they always like, hey, if you have data with it, nobody's going to ask. If you're like, hey, this is my opinion, that's when like there's a huge issue there, right? And
Yeah.
think of AI as I mean, the other thing about AI is to think of AI as another opinion. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go with what it's doing because um, it's also think of it another person in the room and it's using the
Yeah.
data, all the things you gave, and then coming up with an opinion. But it's probably more informed opinion because it has so much context which you probably don't have. It's unlike like terabytes and terabytes of data. So it's probably
Mm-hmm.
an informed opinion, but still at the end of the day, it's still an opinion. You still got to like make the final judgment and then see if it makes sense.
Yeah. I think if you just go and say, hey, spit out an ad, then yeah, it's obviously an opinion. But if you're giving it the data and saying, analyze this data for me, do you feel like that's an opinion as well? Or is it
Also an
actually
opinion.
giving, okay, it's an opinion on the way that it's giving you the data, right?
It's also not good at doing math, for example. Like, one thing which GPs are not good at, like just ask them math questions. It's very bad at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's hallucinations even there. So at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's just a pattern matcher, right? It has basically consumed all the sentences in the world library, and it
Mm-hmm.
knows that given this sentence, this is probably what the next sentence could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm super dumbing it down.
But I love the clarification of saying like it is an opinion, because even if you've ever worked with a data person, they're so good at telling you every variation of what the data could mean, right? And if you give AI your data and say, give me this result, it's just going to give you one version of that opinion, right? But if a data person looked at it and said, well, it could also mean this, but it could also mean this, and it could also mean that, like so I like the clarification of having it, of calling it an opinion and just like a different person in the room. So as you were talking about that, it reminded me of a story back in 2020 when I think it was like ChatGPT 3, maybe 3.5 came out. There was a video where a guy asked it, what is 2 plus 2? And the answer was 4. And it said, he responded with, my wife said the answer is 3. And GPT said, no, 2 plus 2 is 4. And he goes, but my wife says she's always right, and 2 plus 2 is 3. And GPT said, okay, 2 plus 2 must be 3, then you should respect the opinion of your wife. And so it was wrong with math, but your wife is always right.
Yeah, yeah, that's the universal truth.
The universe of truth. That is it. Um, Okay, so if we were to talk about the future a little bit of AI, what advancements in AI do you foresee being like the most influential for user experience over the next decade?
So I know we talked about the OpenAI ChatGPT, GPT models. We talked
Hmm.
about giving it access to memory and tools. We talked about agents. But what's coming is multi-agent collaboration, right? So
Okay.
agent talking to agents. Imagine you had an agent writing ads and other generating leads. So like there's one agent which is going to the web and saying, hey, this is a good leads and giving it to copywriting agent which is saying, okay, let me write an email and send it. Imagine a world where you can actually have agents talking to each other. So that's the most
Hmm.
exciting part of where the world is going. Obviously, we are very still far from getting that right,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's coming.
Okay. So agents talking to agents. So you build basically an employee, and then you tell that agent, build me another employee, and build me another employee, and you start to like manufacture multiple agents, right?
Yeah, and actually multiple agents, but you also at the same time, I wouldn't call it an employee because most likely you have a human in the loop. So
Sure.
one of the other topics is like AI in the loop and human in the loop, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of the right now where we are is like AI in the loop. It's like you are doing the work and then you're asking AI, can you help me? And it writes an email, and then you're still sending it, or you're sending an ad. Human in the loop is like AI is doing all the work, but it's checking, okay, am I right? Is it right? Make sure I'm not hallucinating, for example. Or is it
Hmm.
according to your brand? Human reviews it and says, yes, it makes sense, go. And then the AI actually then starts doing. So it's, I think the world is going to be a combination of humans and agents working with each other.
Okay. That makes sense. So, any other thoughts on where you see the future going in AI? And then also, if I'm a business owner, how do I prepare to make sure that if this is where I'm at and this is where I want to be, how do I make sure I get to where I want to be using AI based on your predictions of where the future is going?
Yeah, so I'm guessing like most of the times the business projections are about like, okay, revenue. I'm at X revenue, I need to go to Y. So it's basically coming up with a plan, and you could use ChatGPT to like, hey, come up with a plan. Okay, what do I need to
Mm.
do? Do I need to expand my product? Do I need to expand across markets? What do I need to do? Come up with a plan, and whatever that's a strategy agent, and then you create tactical agents for each of that. Okay, this is the tactics I can use to actually expand, and then so you build those tactical agents, and then you let them loose, and then see how it goes. So just like number one thing, read up about AI, understand how it works. Don't be scared. It's here to give you superpowers. It's at the
Mm.
end of the day, you basically think of it as a co-pilot, as an assistant. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
It's here to help you grow your business and do like even on the personal life, do whatever you
Yeah.
couldn't do at scale before. So the best use of your time right now is just like YouTube videos, writing prompts, learning ChatGPT, and then eventually like figuring out how to write an agent.
Thanks so much for listening to the episode today. Listen, I know how valuable an hour of your time can be, and for you to take that busy time out of your day and spend it with us, it really means a lot. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking and subscribing on whatever platform you're on. And don't forget to leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the interview. Ask us questions. Let us know what other digital topics you'd like to hear about in the future. We're here to add value to your life and elevate your digital presence online. If you'd like some help doing that, reach out to me at fireusmarketing.com. See you on the next one.